Aiken's defense will have its hands full with Barnwell quarterback Cameron Austin and the rest of the Warhorses offense. Austin accounted for 305 total yards and 5 touchdowns, 4 of them on the ground, in last week's win over Orangeburg-Wilkinson to snap a 2-game losing streak. Jaquan Peeples rushed for 97 yards and a score, Jaquan Peeples had 103 receiving yards, and Logan Sturkie had 73 receiving yards and a score. That's going to test an Aiken defense that did a good job defending the run against Strom Thurmond 2 weeks ago but got torched by the Rebels' passing attack. Jameat Williams got loose a few times in that game, accounting for 121 yards of total offense and a touchdown, so the Warhorses will have to keep him within their grasp. Aiken's passing game has produced some big gains so far this season, but the Hornets are going to have to do a better job of taking care of the football after turning it over 3 times 2 weeks ago. Midland Valley will look to keep the train rolling on the road this week against a Westwood team on a 3-game losing streak. The Mustangs, the 10th-ranked team in Class Quadruple A, will again lean on 1,000-yard running back Trayvon Dunbar, Preston McNair and the offensive line to get things going against the Redhawks. Quarterback Preston Butler will be a player to watch, as he continues to improve as he gets more games under his belt. He was efficient in last week's win over Harlem, and now he faces a Westwood defense that gave up 263 passing yards and 3 touchdowns last week against White Knoll. North Augusta's offense probably can't wait to get back on the field after rolling up 494 yards against a stout Greenwood defense in last week's 49-40 win. Michael Doe ran for 152 yards and 4 touchdowns, and Corey Tillman had a huge game by going 12 for 13 passing for 155 yards and a score and also rushing for 149 yards and another touchdown. Now comes the biggest test of the season to date in a Dutch Fork team that last week snapped an uncharacteristic 3-game losing streak by blowing out Stratford. The Silver Foxes have a strong running game of their own, and in last week's win they scored 3 touchdowns on special teams. South Aiken needs to be locked in from the opening kickoff so that the T-Breads aren't having to fight their way back into a game like in last week's loss to River Bluff. They showed plenty of fight in erasing a 21-0 first-quarter deficit to tie the game at 28, then let mistakes and bad breaks snowball into 35 consecutive points by the Gators. Quarterback Terrence Smith can keep South Aiken in any game, and last week he accounted for 321 total yards and 4 touchdowns. Running back Javon Edwards returned from injury and rushed for 108 yards, more importantly doing so on 21 carries, and even with both a little banged up it's still the best 1-2 punch in the state. The defense will need to have a better night against White Knoll quarterback Landon Sharp, who threw for 263 yards and 3 touchdowns and also rushed for a score in last week's win over Westwood. Fox Creek returns to play after a bye week, and in their last game the Predators picked up their first win of the season by beating McCormick. Up next is an airport team that's already having one of its best seasons in years. Last week the Eagles had some success in the passing game, particularly the connection between quarterback Jesse Ray Hoover and receiver Avery Jones, and made a late defensive stand in a 10-7 win over Lugoff Elgin. Devonta Holmes had a big night for the Predators in their win 2 weeks ago, and he could have a hand in spoiling Airport's hot start. Silver Bluff defeated Orangeburg-Wilkinson 14-7 on September 16, 2022. Keys to the game: Silver Bluff, ranked 9th in Class A, had last week off following the Bulldogs' loss to Midland Valley. Now they'll look to bounce back against a reeling Orangeburg-Wilkinson team that has scored 12 total points in 3 games this season. The Silver Bluff defense may feel like it has something to prove this week after Midland Valley gained 401 yards against them. The Bulldogs didn't have much working in the passing game in that loss, so this is an opportunity to get the offense back to the balanced unit it was in the season-opening win over South Aiken. Like Silver Bluff, Strom Thurmond had a bye last week and is also ranked number 9 in Class A. Evans is likely hoping the Rebels' passing game cooled off a bit during the week off after putting up 230 yards and 4 scores against Aiken. Quan Edmond and Tennessee commit Braylon Staley connected 6 times for 121 yards and 3 touchdowns, and the Knights' defense is going to have to keep an extra set of eyes on Staley at all times. Evans is strong in the kicking game, which the Knights may use to eliminate Staley as a special teams threat. The Knights have a pair of big play runners in Rayshawn King and E.J. Hogan, so the Rebels will be counting on a strong defensive performance to slow them down. It's time for a bounce back for both programs after losses last week. Blackville Hilda suffered its first of the season in a 7-6 heartbreaker at Bamberg Erhardt, in number 7. Denmark Oler fell from the ranks of the unbeaten with a 28-26 loss to Allendale Fairfax. Blackville Hilda's defense has been stout this season, and the Fighting Hawks will look for another big outing against a Denmark Oler offense that can score in a hurry. The Fighting Hawks offense was slowed by Bamberg Erhardt, so they'll try to get their powerful run game and quick strike passing attack back on track in the Region 4A opener. Louisville defeated Ridge Spring Minetta 40-0 on September 16, 2022. Keys to the game: Ridge Spring Minetta is the lone Region 4A team that isn't beginning league play this week, but that doesn't mean the Trojans have a cupcake opponent. The non-region gauntlet wraps up with a road trip to Louisville, the number 1 team in Class A with a huge roster for the state's smallest classification. The Lions lost 24-7 to Class A number 2 Oceanside Collegiate in the season opener, and since then they've outscored their opponents 170-0. Ian Grissom has already passed for 1,129 yards and 14 touchdowns, so RSM's secondary will have to be prepared for a pass-heavy attack. The Trojans can also move the ball quickly through the air, and after a bye week they'll look to produce some more fireworks. Wagoner Sally defeated Hunter Kennard Tyler 27-22 on September 16, 2022. Keys to the game for Wagoner Sally: it's just a matter of continuing to do what the War Eagles do. The power run attack generated 442 yards in last week's win over Swansea, and the War Eagles will look for more along those lines against a Hunter Kennard Tyler team that hasn't allowed a point yet this season. The defense had a great night against Swansea, with the starters only allowing a lone touchdown on one big play. They'll have to be sound this week against an HKT team that always has big play threats. The key for Wagoner Sally will be to keep those players from getting behind them. Both teams are ranked number 9 in the Class A poll, and this is the Region 4A opener for both. Williston Elko will look to get its run game going after it sputtered in last week's loss to Branchville. The Blue Devils were able to pass the ball well, and Willie Brown had another big game with a couple of special teams touchdowns. Jamarion Kirkland led the defense, which allowed 459 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground. Up next is a third-ranked Calhoun County team averaging 42.5 points per game. The Saints are balanced offensively, with Amir Smith leading the rushing attack. The headliner for the Saints is 6'3" wide receiver Christian Zachary, who committed to Virginia in June. He's the primary target in the passing game, and the Blue Devils will have to limit him however they can.